Olivia has been married for 15 years and is a mother of 3 young children. While her husband threw himself into intense athletic training, Olivia found herself shouldering the family responsibilities alone. As his hobby began to disrupt the balance of their marriage and family life, Olivia was forced to make a difficult choice to protect herself and her children. Olivia and her husband had been together for 15 years, building a life marked by growth, partnership, and countless shared moments. From the early days of financial struggle to the chaos and joy of raising 3 young children, they had always approached life as a team. One thing that had consistently connected them over the years was their mutual love for fitness. They'd bonded over morning jogs, weekend bike rides, and experimenting with healthy meals together. It wasn't just about staying fit, it was a shared value, a rhythm that had long been part of their relationship. But as time passed and their lives became more demanding with 3 little ones under 10, that balance between personal interest and shared responsibility started to falter. Olivia adjusted her workouts to fit the new reality, quick sessions at home, stretching during nap time, or short walks with the stroller. Her husband, however, was driven by a different fire. Always hungry for the next challenge, he began to set his sights on something much bigger, completing a triathlon. At first, Olivia supported him wholeheartedly. She understood that he thrived on goals and needed something to push himself. The idea of him training for a triathlon even made her proud. It was ambitious, bold, and perfectly in character for the man she loved. She cheered him on, helped him with nutrition planning, and encouraged their kids to get excited about their dad's big race. But within weeks, the reality of what that training entailed hit hard. Her husband was suddenly training nearly every day. After work, he would head out for 2 or 3 hours, sometimes to bike, sometimes to run, returning only when the kids were already asleep. There were days when he left the house before sunrise to swim and still barely had time for a quick meal with the family. Dinner time became mom and kids time. Bedtime stories were read by Olivia alone. Weekends that used to be filled with park trips and family breakfasts now featured long solo sessions for him and lonely routines for her. Though she admired his dedication, Olivia couldn't help but feel abandoned. She wasn't resentful of his passion, but of the imbalance. The weight of the household, the emotional labor, the practical load, it all began to fall entirely on her shoulders. She loved being a mom, but not a single mom within a marriage. The partnership that had once been about shared effort now felt like a solo act. She brought it up gently, not as an accusation, but as a cry for help. She asked him to consider scaling back to make more space for their family amidst the training. But to him, this time was sacred, a form of self-care and identity. He needed it. He insisted to feel alive. Olivia understood everyone deserves something of their own, but she also wondered, where did that leave the U.S.? In those quiet moments, Olivia began reflecting on what it means to support a partner and be supported in return. She wasn't asking him to give up on his dreams, but she was asking him to be present, to recognize that dreams have a cost, and sometimes someone else is silently paying the bill. Passion matters. So does commitment. But when one person's pursuit overshadows the needs of the whole family, it stops feeling like partnership and starts to feel like sacrifice. Although Olivia tried her best to support her husband in the beginning, the reality of living with a full-time athlete quickly became more overwhelming than she had anticipated. The endless training sessions, the non-stop packed schedule, and his demanding job meant that his presence in the family became more symbolic than real. She didn't blame him for his drive or ambition, but the feeling of being left behind, forgotten, and pushed to the margins of their shared life was impossible to ignore. Daily life fell into a one-sided rhythm. Olivia was solely responsible for taking the kids to school, preparing all the meals, doing laundry cleaning, and managing every emotional meltdown of their 3 young children. There were no breaks, no evening wind downs with her husband, no shared responsibility in the small but essential routines they once managed together. As her husband's physical endurance increased, Olivia's emotional resilience slowly wore thin. More and more she felt alone. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from temporary absence, but the deep aching kind that arises when you feel disconnected from someone who's still physically there. Their conversations dwindled. Instead of chatting about their days, their kids, or their dreams, most of their discussions revolved around training schedules, bike speeds, lap times, and nutrition strategies for competition. Olivia began to realize that the man she married, someone who once prioritized their family and shared every little moment, was now consumed by a version of himself centered on personal performance. She didn't resent him for having goals. Dreams are what propel people forward. But she started to wonder if a dream requires someone else to give up time, energy, and emotional support without reciprocation. Is it still a worthy dream? Olivia no longer felt like a partner in this journey. She felt like the support crew holding everything together while he raced ahead. The hardest part wasn't the exhaustion, it was the loss of connection. She missed the family outings, the bedtime routines they used to tag team the evenings curled up together on the couch after the kids were asleep. Those simple moments had been replaced by timers, running shoes, and long cycling routes stretching deep into the weekends. As much as she didn't want to, Olivia began to wrestle with the thought that if her husband continued down this path with the same intensity, she might have to make a painful choice to step away from the marriage so that both of them could live the lives they wanted. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she could no longer live in a marriage where she felt utterly alone. After 3 grueling months of training, race day finally arrived. Olivia brought the kids to cheer him on, and the whole family felt proud watching her husband cross the finish line, radiant with joy. It was a moment Olivia wanted to hold on to, not just because of his achievement, but because she hoped life would return to its normal rhythm. She longed for family dinners, unhurried mornings, and most of all, the return of the partner she used to share every little moment with. But just a month later, when things seemed to be settling down, her husband started talking about entering another triathlon. Not only did he want to do it again, he was now considering making it a year-round pursuit. Olivia listened quietly, and then with as much calm as she could muster, she asked, "If you're really planning to do this continuously, have you thought about what that means for me and the kids?" That question opened the door to a tense and difficult conversation. When Olivia shared that she couldn't keep living like a single mom, that if nothing changed, they might need to reconsider their marriage, her husband became defensive and upset. He accused her of being unsupportive, of trying to sabotage his dream. He argued that if they were just dating, she'd never dare to ask him to give up something he loved. And to be honest, he wasn't wrong. If they were still in the early stages of a relationship, Olivia might have walked away before ever committing to someone with such an all-consuming lifestyle. But Olivia wasn't issuing an ultimatum. She wasn't yelling or demanding. She was simply stating a painful truth. If life continued the way it had during his training, she couldn't endure it any longer. She was exhausted, emotionally depleted, and starting to lose a sense of herself. With 3 small children, she didn't just need a financial provider. She needed a present partner, a father for their children, someone to share the daily joys and burdens of life. The days that followed were cold and distant. Though her husband eventually said he would give up triathlons because the family matters most, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that resentment was simmering just beneath the surface. It showed up in quiet digs. Some people just don't understand what it feels like to want to live fully. Or worse, in the heat of an argument, I gave up my passion for you, and for what? Olivia started to wonder, did he truly give it up out of love, or did he feel coerced? And if his sacrifice came with lingering bitterness, were they really still together, or merely coexisting under the guise of marriage? After the tense conversation, Olivia's husband finally announced that he would stop pursuing triathlons. He said that family was what truly mattered, and he didn't want to trade his wife and children for medals or personal glory. In that moment, Olivia was genuinely moved. She sensed a shift, and part of her held on to the fragile hope that maybe this was the turning point that they could rebuild together, find a new rhythm, and restore the harmony they once had. But reality unfolded differently. Although her husband no longer woke at 4 a.m. to swim or spent hours cycling after work, his presence at home felt distant, distracted. He was physically there, but emotionally absent. More and more, he made passive-aggressive comments about giving up his passion. "Guess I'm just stuck walking around the block now," he'd say. Or, "People talk about living with passion, but apparently passion makes you selfish." Olivia stayed silent. She didn't want to escalate the tension, but each remark chipped away at her, reminding her that his sacrifice came wrapped in quiet bitterness, not genuine willingness. That resentment began to creep into other parts of their relationship. During disagreements about parenting or chores, he'd bring it up again. "I gave up my passion for this family. What have you given up?" It felt like his sacrifice had become a bargaining chip, something to be wielded whenever he wanted to win an argument. For Olivia, this was even more exhausting than his training days. At least back then, the emotional distance had been obvious and honest. Now they were under the same roof, sharing meals and routines, but growing further apart in spirit. Olivia began to feel like the villain in her own story. She hadn't forced anything, but somehow she'd become the person who killed the dream. She didn't want her husband to be unhappy, but since giving up triathlons, he seemed less like himself. That realization haunted her. Had she done the right thing by being honest? Was keeping him close actually an act of love? Or was it a form of control disguised as family commitment? She could also see something else clearly. Neither of them had truly been happy since that turning point. He lived in quiet regret and blame. She lived in inner conflict and doubt. They still talked, but the connection was thin. They lived together but weren't really together. And Olivia knew if they kept going like this, holding on out of duty rather than love, they'd only continue drifting apart. The family they had once worked so hard to build would slowly lose its heart. As time went on, Olivia realized that her marriage was stuck between two extremes: outward closeness and inner distance. They still lived together, still raised their 3 children as a team, still shared meals, and went to bed in the same room. But the true moments of connection, the unguarded conversations, the natural intimacy, the warmth that had once flowed effortlessly, had quietly slipped away. She didn't blame her husband for still feeling a sense of loss. Everyone ties part of their identity to what they love. And having to give up triathlon not by choice, but by the quiet pressure of circumstance had surely left him with a wound that hadn't healed. But for that very reason, Olivia couldn't pretend everything was fine. She couldn't keep living a life where one person suppressed themselves just so the other wouldn't feel guilty. That wasn't love. It was prolonged endurance. Olivia began asking herself if neither of them was truly happy. What was the purpose of holding on to this relationship in its current form? She used to think that walking away was a failure, that giving up only happened when love ran out. But now she saw things differently. Sometimes stepping back isn't from lack of love, but because of love. Because you care too much to watch someone you love live a life that shrinks who they are. So, Olivia started to consider new paths, not rash decisions like divorce, not abandonment of responsibility, but a deeper, more honest conversation about the nature of happiness and partnership. She wanted her husband to be himself again, and if that meant returning to triathlon, then so be it, as long as it was within a framework they could both agree on. She wasn't looking for the perfect partner who was always physically present. She was looking for a mature man who knew how to balance passion with responsibility, self with family. What Olivia truly wanted now wasn't to win the argument or be proven right. It was to live in a relationship where both people moved forward together, rather than one dragging while the other silently endured. She didn't want a sacrifice wrapped in resentment. She wanted a choice rooted in love and understanding from both of them. To make that happen, she knew she had to speak up, not to complain, but to open the door for genuine reconnection. Because if they kept avoiding conflict, kept letting things go for the sake of peace, the distance between them would only grow. And when that distance becomes too wide, love can lose its shape entirely.